Al Pacino doesn't need to flip tables or shout across a set. When he's finished with someone, he doesn't raise his voice, he simply goes quiet. And that silence cuts deeper than any insult. For decades, Pacino has been the heartbeat of American cinema, the intensity behind Serpico, the soul of The Godfather, the unshakable force in Heat and Scent of a Woman. He's the actor who carried entire generations of storytelling on his shoulders, who turned every line, every pause, every look into art. But behind that legendary career lies something far colder. Because when Al Pacino severs a connection, it stays severed. He doesn't burn bridges, he buries them. There are no public rants, no tabloid feuds, no redemption dinners 20 years later, just a name quietly erased from his life script. And if you made that list, there's no coming back. Today, we're going inside that silence, into the stories of 6 actors and directors who learned what it means to fall out of sync with Pacino, why they clashed, how it ended, and why none of them ever found their way back into his orbit. Because with Pacino, the quietest endings are often the most permanent. And wait until you hear the final name. Even the director refuses to discuss what really happened. Number 6, William Friedkin, the director who pushed too hard. When the Godfather trilogy wrapped, Pacino was a rising deity in Hollywood, respected, intense, selective. When he teamed up with director William Friedkin for Cruising 1980, it looked like a match made in cinematic heaven. Friedkin had just conquered the industry with The French Connection, and Pacino was Hollywood's most magnetic method actor. But what began as creative synergy soon dissolved into open frustration. Friedkin was famously disciplined. He expected actors to show up razor-focused, lines memorized, every move rehearsed. Pacino thrived on the opposite, instinct, volatility, and emotional improvisation. The moment cameras rolled, their differences collided. Pacino arrived late, sometimes unprepared, driven more by mood than schedule. He improvised lines, shifted tone mid-scene, and resisted tight direction. Tio Friedkin, it felt like chaos. Tio Pacino, it was the only way to breathe life into a role. Crew members recalled shouting matches that pierced the night shoots. One assistant director described the set as a chess match between 2 kings who refused to surrender. Friedkin called Pacino unprofessional. Pacino quietly stopped listening. The director later admitted, "He was the biggest disappointment I ever worked with." That single quote hit like a bullet. For Pacino, it wasn't a wound, it was a verdict. When a creative relationship breaks his trust, he doesn't rebuild. He walks away. They never collaborated again. No joint interviews, no reunion panels, no nostalgic retellings. Their names haven't shared a credit since that date at Hollywood. That silence is louder than a scream. Number 5, James Foley, the director who lost the rhythm. When Glengarry Glen Ross arrived in 1992, it was a triumph, a tightly coiled, ferocious look into ambition and failure. Critics hailed Pacino's performance as magnetic and sharp, but behind the camera, his partnership with James Foley unraveled like a frayed wire. Foley was methodical. He loved structure, control, precision. Pacino was pure instinct, fire, motion. Together, they created brilliance on screen, but chaos off it. Pacino would change lines mid-take, alter his tone without warning, or refuse to rehearse scenes the same way twice. Foley, who relied on rehearsed rhythm, found it maddening. He once confided to a colleague, "I wanted tension in the film. What I got was tension on set." By the time shooting wrapped, both men were exhausted. The film a masterpiece, the partnership dead. Pacino never badmouthed Foley. Foley never criticized Pacino publicly, but when asked years later if he'd direct him again, he smiled tightly and said, "Some performances are best left once." That silence said everything. In a town where second chances are currency, neither man ever spent another moment working together. Pacino moved on as he always did. No drama, no apology, just distance. Number 4, Marlon Brando, the legend and the shadow. It's almost poetic, 2 titans of cinema sharing the same frame, the same bloodline of brilliance. When Pacino joined The Godfather, he was the hungry newcomer. Brando was already an icon. Their chemistry on screen was electric, father and son, power and inheritance. But off-screen, things were far less harmonious. Brando was unpredictable, often late, sometimes dismissive of direction. The studio tolerated it because he was Brando. Pacino, still unproven, didn't get that privileged. He watched the double standard in silence, but it festered. Then came the Oscars. Brando won for Best Actor. Pacino, who carried the film's emotional weight, was relegated to a supporting actor nomination. He boycotted the ceremony in protest. Later, he explained, "I didn't think it was right. I was in that movie more than he was." It wasn't bitterness, it was betrayal. From that point, their relationship froze. They never worked together again. Pacino offered polite words when asked about Brando, but the warmth was gone. That he respected him, but he never followed in his footsteps. In Hollywood, silence can mean admiration. But in this case, it was mourning for a connection that never truly existed. Number 3, Robert De Niro, Two Titans, One Cold War. For decades, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro have been Hollywood's eternal twins, born from the same city streets, forged in the same acting revolution. They've shared screens in The Godfather Part 2, Heat, Righteous Kill, and The Irishman. But despite their cinematic chemistry behind the camera, there's always been distance. On Heat, their first real face-to-face scene together, the energy was monumental. Fans expected friendship, collaboration, bonding. Instead, they got professionalism, cold, deliberate, and impersonal. Insiders said the two men rarely spoke between takes. De Niro prepared methodically, rehearsing each nuance. Pacino chased lightning, spontaneous, unpredictable, alive. Director Michael Mann had to manage them separately, like two storms headed toward collision. Pacino once said, "Bob's a craftsman. I'm instinct." It sounded respectful, but it also drew a line. When they reunited for The Irishman, the old distance remained. No tension, no argument, just a chill professionalism. Scorsese often acted as a buffer, making sure their storms didn't overlap. In interviews, De Niro's compliments are polite. Pacino's comments, equally restrained. They admire each other's work from afar. Pacino once said, "We're not friends. We just show up." In a business where egos clash loudly, their silence is almost eerie. It's not hatred, it's two empires that never learn to merge, two kings of the same throne room, each ruling his own corner. Number 2, Michelle Pfeiffer, the coldest co-star. When Scarface was being cast, Michelle Pfeiffer was far from a household name. She was untested, fragile in the eyes of the studio, and Al Pacino wasn't convinced she belonged. He reportedly told producers she was too soft, too polished, that she lacked the hard edge needed to play Elvira Hancock, Tony Montana's brittle, tragic lover. Pfeiffer felt the resistance the moment she stepped into the room. "I knew he didn't want me there," she said years later. "I had to prove I belonged." And she did. Her audition was electric. Director Brian De Palma overruled Pacino's doubts and cast her anyway. But on set, the air was glacial. Pacino kept his distance. No small talk, no warmth, just professionalism. That wasn't cruelty. It was focus, maybe pride, maybe discomfort. Still, the friction was real. While Pacino embodied volcanic rage, Pfeiffer countered with icy detachment, a contrast that defined the film's pulse. Their chemistry worked on screen because it didn't work in life. When Scarface became a cult phenomenon, people expected them to reunite. They never did. Even decades later, Pacino rarely mentioned Pfeiffer in interviews, and Pfeiffer, though gracious, never denied the chill. "I admire him," she said, "but it was hard." That's Pacino's pattern. When the rhythm breaks, he doesn't repair it, he just moves on, closing the door with quiet finality. Number 1, Gene Hackman, the legend who wouldn't bend. Before the world saw Pacino as Michael Corleone, he starred opposite Gene Hackman in Scarecrow, 1973, a film now considered a masterpiece of raw humanity. Two actors, two towering talents, and two completely opposite temperaments. Hackman was direct, no-nonsense, allergic to overthinking. Pacino was method, introspective, and deeply emotional. They didn't blend, they repelled. Crew members described quiet tension, like static in the air. Hackman pushed for efficiency. Pacino searched for emotional truth. 1 Grip remembered. Gene hated wasting time. Al lived in it. Pacino later said in an interview, "Working with Gene wasn't the easiest. We had different ideas." That single line, soft, careful, revealed everything. There were no fights, no headlines, but after Scarecrow, the silence was final. They never reunited, never praised each other publicly, never even shared a stage at Retrospective's Point Two Legends, each brilliant in his own right, unable to occupy the same space twice. Sometimes the fiercest feuds don't explode, they evaporate. Pacino didn't slam the door, he simply never opened it again. In Hollywood, grudges are often loud, fought in tabloids, settled in interviews, revived on late-night talk shows. Pacino doesn't play that game. When a collaboration goes wrong, he doesn't retaliate, he just erases the name. You won't hear him gossip. You won't see him rant. You'll simply notice who isn't invited back. That silence, that selective absence, is his final statement that it's not about pride. It's about control, about self-respect, about protecting the art that defines him. For Pacino, acting has never been a career. It's a battlefield of emotion, and not everyone survives it, that he pours himself into his roles until they consume him, and anyone who disrupts that process, no matter how talented, gets left behind. Behind every iconic Pacino performance lies a cost. Relationships that burned quietly, collaborations that ended without ceremony. He's walked away from directors who pushed too hard, co-stars who challenged his rhythm, and legends who tested his pride. And yet each time he emerged sharper, more enigmatic, more unshakably himself. Because for Al Pacino, silence isn't weakness, that it's the final cut. And in that stillness lies the truth. You don't always hear the argument, you just notice who never shows up again.